Once that's done loading.
There is a lot of construction noise in the background. Do you want to mute me or for now?
Do you not have a button to do that?
I do.
I'll let you take it so you don't have to wait on me to unmute you. Okay, we're good. We're live.
Great. Thanks, Colton. Hello, I am Juliana Reshik, and I serve as the chair of the Continuing Nurse Education Committee of the Kansas State Board of Nursing. I ask the members of the Continuing Nurse Education Committee to respond to a roll call signifying their presence at this open meeting via conference call. Rebecca Saunders.
Present.
Audrey Goldsmith.
Present.
Gwen Lloyd.
Present.
Giovanni Gahn.
Present.
Melanie Burnett.
Present.
Laura Arbile.
Present.
Kanetta.
Present.
Karen Offenberg. I ask that the following board staff members to signify their attendance. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator.
Here.
And Chelsea Stevenson, Education Secretary.
Here.
Public comment allows individuals to address the Continuing Nurse Education Committee about their concerns, but the Kansas Opens Meetings Act, which is known as COMA, does not require the Continuing Nurse Education Committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Public comment will not be taken today because there is the possibility that the connection for this remote meeting may be lost over time, and the time for the meeting may not allow everyone who is present to comment. Additionally, we will not know what comments an individual may make, and we would want to provide notice to the public of our intent to discuss a particular matter so that the public may listen and observe our discussion. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by Zoom and YouTube, I state for the record the following information. On March 8th, 2021, the board sent notice of the meeting for the Continuing Nurse Education Committee to all individuals who have requested notice of the committee's meetings. Additionally, the notice and agenda were posted on the board's website, ksbn.kansas.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice and agenda at the website or by sending an email to carol.moreland@ks.gov with the subject line, request for the agenda, and the board staff will send it to you. The notice contains the internet links to access the meeting by Zoom and YouTube, and the notice also contains the Zoom telephone number to attend this meeting by telephone call. All of these electronic mediums allow the public to attend this meeting free of charge. The notice also advises individuals to contact the board's office at 785-296-2967 if they experience any technical issues during the meeting. The state of disaster emergency due to COVID-19 pandemic, as declared by Governor Kelly and extended by the Kansas legislature, will expire on March 31st, 2021. Because the requirements of COMA are not suspended, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to COMA and KAR 16-20-1 concerning compliance with COMA during an emergency declaration. The only mediums for interactive communication offered for this meeting are the connections by Zoom and YouTube as previously stated. Each member of the committee, board staff, or presenter shall state the person's name and title each time the person speaks or votes, as the case may be. Each participant to the meeting shall ensure microphones, phones, or other electronic devices are on mute when the participant is not speaking. Each motion will be clearly stated by the committee votes, and the chair will announce the result of the final vote. A statement or motion will clearly identify and authorize by delegation each member of the committee or staff who will be permitted to sign any document on behalf of the board. A recording of the meeting will be posted to the board's website. The committee has the following items listed on the agenda: call to order, review of the on-site packet, additions or revisions to the agenda, announcements, approval of minutes for the meeting held in December of 2020, unfinished business, new business, agenda for the committee meeting in June of 2021, and adjournment. Although the agenda does not include an executive session, if the committee elects to exercise the option to go into executive session, the committee will follow this process. First, the board must be in open session before going into an executive session. Second, a motion will be made and seconded pursuant to KSA 75-4319B. The motion must contain the statement of justification for closure, the subjects to be discussed, and the time and place that the open meeting will resume. Thirdly, if a motion for executive session passes, public will be excluded from this portion of the meeting, and the executive session will be conducted by electronic means that will not be made available to the public. The board members will return to the open meeting after the executive session. Fourth, the open meeting will resume when the board members return to the Zoom and YouTube meeting after the executive session. And finally, fifth, the complete motion for an executive session will be recorded in the minutes. The meeting is now called to order, and the committee will now consider the next item on the agenda. So I don't believe we have an on-site packet. Is that accurate, Carol?
That is correct. We do not. Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I'm jumping between screens here to try to, might take me just a minute. So let's review the agenda. And is there any additions to the agenda or revisions? So hearing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as written.
Madam Chair, this is Rebecca, board member. I vote to approve the agenda.
Adri Goldsmith, board member, second it.
Thank you, Adri. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any announcements today?
Madam Chair, this is Carol. I don't think we do.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a look at the December 8th, 2020 minutes.
Madam Chair, this is Chelsea. I do have a motion prepared if you would like me to read that.
That'd be great, Chelsea. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a committee member that would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the December 2020 Continuing Nursing Education Committee meeting minutes as drafted.
This is Laura Auberly. I so move.
Thank you, Laura. Sorry, Giovanni, was that you?
Yes, Giovanni Gonell, second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Move on to our unfinished business. We had the delinquent long-term care CNE providers for the submission for annual report. Carol, I know we asked for this at our last meeting. You want to say anything about it and share maybe what the red means?
Okay. All right. This is Carol Moreland. Yes, you have this on page 6 in your packet, and you did ask that this be brought back this time. The ones in red actually did not submit the annual report and the fees for 2019 and 2020. Now, I believe one of those is planning to relinquish Bailey Medical Service. We've kind of been back and forth with that one. And the last I heard, he was planning to relinquish it. The ones in black then would be the ones that we did not get for 2020. So as a reminder, what they have to do every year is they have to submit an annual report to us that has a lot of the statistics for the CNE that they've offered during that yearly period. Plus they have to pay us a fee. I believe it's $50. So the ones that you see listed here did not do it for 2020, and the ones in red did not do it for 2019. You had asked me to bring that back this time. So, so that's that report right there for you.
So Carol, I know Mercy Hospital Fort Scott they have closed.
Okay.
Yes.
So I don't know if you need official notice from someone within the Mercy Health System to tell you that, or.
Okay, we can check on that. And this one relinquished. Just to kind of let the committee know, part of the problem here is we try to get a hold of whoever we have as the contact. And if that person's no longer there, then we kind of start branching out to, like, if there's an education division, is there somebody that we could contact in education that might know, you know, the status of this and stuff like that. Sometimes it's a little bit of a hunt to go on because unfortunately, sometimes the providers are not real good about letting us know when the contacts change. And so that is part of the problem that we run into.
So I'd encourage the Mercy Hospital in Joplin was kind of the administrative partner for that Mercy Hospital Fort Scott. So not that official communication, it shouldn't really come from me. I think it should come from them.
Okay.
But that might be a good connection is Mercy Hospital in Joplin could verify that for you.
Okay, we can reach out to them. Thank you.
Joplin, Missouri. So
yeah.
I think we need to decide what we do with this. And when and really that may be our second agenda item under unfinished business is what actions do we want to take, knowing that we have at least 4 from 2019 that haven't responded, and is now going on 2 years, as well as several more for the last year.
Is there a process in the statutes that addresses that? Is there anything
There
in
is. This is Carol, and that's actually what's next on your agenda. And when I had talked, and you saw this in the minutes, when we had talked about this in December, I was kind of under the belief that maybe that needed to be like an executive session or something. However, in talking with our legal counsel, Jan, who's here, and she has Charles here with her, we actually thought it would be better if they came and they just reviewed the overall process, not talking about any of the providers at this point, so that everyone on the committee could understand what is the process that we need to follow whenever you all and the board decide that you want to withdraw an approval. So I don't know if you want to go to that agenda item now, but that's kind of next in line.
I think that sounds great. Yes, please.
Okay. I believe Jan's here.
Make sure I had my microphone on. What you're really kind of looking at is if you want to scroll down on your packet to page 19, you have, and it's a regulation, not a statute. It's KAR 69-7. And on the very bottom of that, in page 7, you have L2, and that talks about if they don't continue to meet the criteria to get for current approval, then, or if they have a material misrepresentation of any fact by an approved provider, that you can withdraw it. But before you can withdraw it, you have to give them notice and the opportunity to, it says to provide, well, right now it says opportunity to be heard. And what that means is that is basically language that you see for due process. For your licensees, they get due process pursuant to the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act, which sets out what you have to do in order to take away a license, or to put conditions or restrictions on it, or to refuse to issue it or renew it. However, this continuing education is not a licensee. You don't issue them a license. You give them approval. So consequently, you're not under Kansas Administrative Procedure Act for giving the approval or withdrawing the approval to someone who applies to be a continuing education provider. So it really comes down, you're kind of offering to, it looks like in this new one, is to strike this notice and just say, after giving them the opportunity to provide written response. And I would suggest probably that needs to be thought about some more, because that's a typical language, notice, and opportunity to be heard that you're going to see for due process. There's different ways that you can go about giving notice to someone. You can like make it very formal, which would be to write up a petition that states the requirements and puts them on notice then of what they've not done, and to tell them that there's going to be a hearing on it and they can appear at that hearing. And if they don't, then at that hearing, you can go ahead and decide whether or not you want to withdraw it. That becomes, it's not necessarily an order, but it's referred to as a final agency action. Once you've decided, given them the opportunity to be heard, and then you issue your decision, it is a final agency action that would be something that is appealable under the Kansas Judicial Review Act. And that means they can appeal it on up to district court. Another way, rather than having go through the formal part, and the board kind of used this several years ago, not for continuing education, but it was for a nursing program, where we sent out a letter and saying, we've done our review and here's all the deficiencies. And you've got, please respond to those deficiencies by a certain date, which was like going to be the next board meeting. And luckily in that instance, they did get everything up to compliance. So consequently, when the board meeting came, they didn't have to do anything further. Everyone got into alliance. I think that was probably Carol was, were you the education specialist at that time? Yeah, so she's a little bit familiar with that.
Yeah.
Another way, though, would be to kind of use the same way that you can follow for if you were under CAPA. Under CAPA, you can do a summary proceeding order. For those of you who are on the investigative committee, you're kind of familiar with that. Basically, it's you review all the documents that they have provided to you and what the requirements are, and then you make a finding as what is missing, what the violations are, what the deficiencies are, and then you would take action against the licensee for whatever remedy you think is appropriate. But again, you're not under CAPA, so you wouldn't be issuing what is called a summary proceeding order, but you would be issuing kind of like a agency action decision, and then you would give them in that the opportunity to respond and to be heard. And so consequently, you would tell them that they have to have it resolved by this date, or they're because that's the hearing date. And then at the hearing, they could come and they could present whatever evidence they have to decide that we think we've complied, and then the board would have to decide whether or not they are in compliance. as far as I know, I mean, it's the board who has to grant, and I don't know what kind of delegation motion you have, but the way this is typically written, your regulation, it says it can be withdrawn by the board. So consequently, it would be good, the actual decision would have to go to the board to decide, unless they would do a delegation motion that would authorize the continuing education committee, advisory committee, to go ahead and make those decisions and to take the action. So that's kind of the first thing would be to, I don't think I can recall in any of the delegation motions that we've done recently that's a part of it. Usually your delegation motions are for those things that come about licensees under the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. So if they wanted to delegate it to you, that would be the first thing they'd have to consider, would be to do that delegation motion to give you the authority to handle it and make the final agency action decision. Otherwise, you would probably have to go to the full board and make a recommendation to them, and then they would decide how they want to proceed. So that's kind of how it's done. Basically, it's just, it can make it formal or as informal as you want on letting them know, here's what you were required to do. You're deficient because you haven't met those requirements. You've got this many days to respond. And if we don't hear from you, then we're going to go ahead and take away that. We're going to withdraw our approval of your courses. Does that kind of make sense?
If we don't hear from them, say we send out the recommendations and we don't hear from them, does that action still go to the board for them to withdraw it at the way the current statutes are set up?
Because it's a board decision, yes, then you would go back to the board and say they didn't respond, and then they would issue the decision to withdraw it. Like I said, if they were to give that delegation motion to the committee, then the committee would look at it and say, okay, your time to respond has expired. You provided nothing. So
Okay.
You're not in compliance.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Carol, I refresh my memory. I know that we looked at this list in December and it seemed shorter to me. Has the staff already reached out to all of the folks on the list?
Chelsea can help me here. I believe so.
Yeah.
That's why we've kind of come up with one of them coming on. I guess a question I have for Jan is, if we reach out to the contact that we have on record, and we're going to send communication, about their deficiencies and a timeline and their opportunity to be heard and stuff like that. If we have no other contact on record, are we responsible to just keep trying to find other contacts, or how does that work?
Well, we'd have to look and see. I mean, to see if you've got a regulation or the statute that the regulation's based on that requires them to provide you with a new contact person. It's sort of like a licensee, where you do have statutes that require them within 30 days to notify you of any new addresses. So if you've got something like that, then the burden is on them to do that. If not, I think we're going to probably have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to kind of decide, it's probably not so much that person that you've given the authority to, the approval to, it's really the institution. And so, the fact that that person left has not really changed that, but it's, trying to figure out who to send it to. So it may be that if we can't figure out who that is, it's sent to the institution and it's left up to them, to figure out who it is and to figure, to go then and do something. But that would be something that we're probably going to have to look at on each basis. But that's something perhaps to consider when you're thinking about changing these regulations, would be that they are required to provide you with the current contact within 30 days of changes, just pretty much like your licensees have to do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Chelsea, we have reached out to all of these, correct? I mean, recently or?
I believe the last time that a formal notice was sent in the mail or through email to whichever contact we had was in the fall. And, you know, ironically, I have heard from a couple that were on the list because they had sent in a change of coordinator notice to me. And so I let them know, hey, by the way, you're delinquent on your annual report. Welcome aboard. So that's kind of, they've reached out to me and said, you know, we've had staff turnover. Can you let me know if we're good to go with the Board of Nursing? And so a lot of them, if they have that staff turnover, they're just not familiar. They don't know that they're delinquent in that if that person is left. And as you mentioned, they're not notifying us. You know, there's no one there to notify us.
And if you send it to I assume you're talking about not an email, but to the institution itself, you know, through the postal mail. If it doesn't come back, they got that information and it's up to them to get it to the right person. It's not up to us to really try and figure out who it is.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I'm assuming is, you know, we're talking about the institution, not the contact person. So if it went out to the institution and never came back, like saying, well, you know, this institution has closed, sort of like what Juliana was talking about a little bit, someplace it's closed. You know, then I think, you know, we've given them the proper notice that they need, you know, and saying that this is, you know, you're deficient and you've got to get up to snuff or we're going to withdraw the approval.
Just very quickly, the other idea is if we are sending notice via, you know, the postal office, it might be a good idea to send it certified with a signature. So that way you get back a signature there, you know, saying this person from this institution grabbed that letter. That might be another way.
Yeah, a lot of agencies will send notices out like this by regular mail and then like certified mail so that you can track it and make sure it got there. What you would also do is to include like a certificate of service, much like you see at the bottom of all your orders, which basically says that where staff says on this date, I certify that I hereby placed the above letter in U.S. Postal Service on the above date. And so that when you tell them they've got so much time to respond, you base it on the data in the certificate of service, because what happens a lot of times, unfortunately, is the date that's on the letter. You may have run a whole pack of these things, let's say on January 1st, but then you don't get them mailed out to the 5th. Well, you've cut them off on some of those days. So consequently, you put a certificate of service that says, this is the day I put them in the post office. And then your letter says you've got 15 days from the date that's on the certificate of service below. And then that way it's real clear in case there is any kind of discrepancy between when you mailed it and when the letter's dated, that it's a certificate of service that controls. That will help somewhere. But yeah, I mean, unless you have some place that you have, you know, you're required to do it by certified mail, you don't really have to, but it's usually probably a good idea to, so that you've got all your ducks in a row when you go to withdraw it. That way you can prove that they actually did get it.
So we've had a lot of good discussion about this. Is there, you know, I guess I'm seeing some options. One might be to go to an executive session to talk about these individually. Second might be to maybe send the certified letter to all of them and ask for a response back by our next meeting. And then depending upon the feelings of this committee, would we just want to make recommendations to the board, or in the meantime, we could ask the full board for support in being able to make decisions about continuing or withdrawing the CNE approval at this committee level. I just throw those out for discussion.
Carol, when they approve it, is it the full board? Do you like send a list to the full board to say that you recommend approval, or is the committee just doing that?
It goes to the full board.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think probably the withdrawal would also go to the full board.
Pretty much how it's structured is anything that is discussed
thought.
in this committee and comes out as a motion is not final until it goes to the full board and they vote on it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
probably tomorrow when you give your report to the full board would be to, see how they want you to proceed.
Okay.
If they want you then to go ahead and contact all those people on their behalf and see what kind of response, and then to notify them perhaps your next board meeting won't be till June, which unfortunately kind of drags it out, but we could work it out somehow that then they would go ahead and allow you to go ahead and contact people and give them it, that by the next board date that they have to be in response. If not, it'll be taken to the full board to withdraw. And then at that board meeting, then you would in June, you would report who was in who got into compliance and ask for them to be continued then as approved, and those who did not respond or who did not get into full compliance then to have their approval withdrawn. And then that way at June, you could at least do some final agency actions then that would get the ball rolling to get some of these providers off. Either, they get in compliance or they drop off the list.
Okay.
That makes the most sense because then we're at least moving forward with it.
I'm just curious, Chelsea, do you have any type of pulse on how many we haven't heard from out of this list?
I was just looking at the list to see. We have, of the ones that are missing the report and the payment, just one of those is the only one that I've heard from, and that's a possible relinquishment. We're waiting on the formal notice of that relinquishment. And then the one that Juliana mentioned earlier there in Fort Scott. So of the 13, I believe, that are missing the payment and report for just 2020, there's a possible 2. Otherwise, the one provider for missing report I've not heard from. The one missing payment only I've not heard from since August. They had said they were working with corporate, and I've not heard anything since. And then the 2 on IV therapy provider reports. There's of course one provider that has not submitted anything in 2 years. I've not heard from them. And then I do not have a good contact for the other IV therapy provider there. And I believe I have also sent just a notice in August to that institution and did not receive a response.
That was going to be my question, is on the addressing, it isn't being addressed to the individuals exactly. Is it being addressed to attention continuing education coordinator, so that it's not, oh, well, that belongs to so-and-so, so I'm not going to open it?
This is Chelsea. What has happened is that I sent an email notice originally to all of the providers to let them know of the upcoming due date. So these are all due, of course, by the end of July. And so they would have received a notice prior to that via email. Then if a response came back that that email was undeliverable, then they would have received something in the mail. And the same process was followed in August to those delinquent providers. I had sent them a reminder, sent them an email, and then if an email came back as undeliverable, they were also sent a letter. And then I also sent letters to all the providers anyway that received an email specifically to a person's name if I hadn't had a response to that email, just to follow up and say, I'd sent you an email, we're delinquent here, here's what needs to happen.
Jan, do we know that if anyone who's delinquent and not in compliance, are they still providing continuing education? Is there any way to find that out?
I don't know if there's any way to find out other than if for some reason we received a certificate in the agency that they've issued within the last 6 months or something. Now, this one that I've been in communication, I actually went out to their website to see if I could get more information, and they had it on their website that they were an approved provider and all of that. And so once I got someone to respond to me, I brought that to their attention, and according to them, they had not been offering continuing nursing education. However, that's not what their website said. No.
You know, Carol, I bet that happens more frequently than the one time you found.
Probably, yeah.
That's a good question that Jan brought up. Excellent question that we hadn't even been thinking about.
That was something I thought about. This is Edgar Goldsmith, board member. That was something I was thinking about. It puts the nurses at risk that are thinking they're getting continuing education credit. And if they're not approved from the sources, it puts the nurses at risk. So it's a very serious matter.
This is Jan again. I mean, that's kind of why I asked, because technically you haven't withdrawn the approval. So they're not complying, but yet they're still getting the benefit of providing the classes. So, and it does, if they don't get in compliance, then, you know, it doesn't help the licensees at all.
So I'd ask if there's support for Jan's recommendation, and I would assume we would need a motion to take this list to the board if there's support that we start communicating with the folks on this list, if they want to and continue providing CNEs and kind of give the notice that they are out of compliance. And if they don't respond by the June board meeting, then further action would be taken. Is that supportive of this group?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Chelsea, I don't know if you can ad lib a motion or if you want one of us to, or.
Well, and I was going to ask just for clarification, is this something we need a motion on, or is this something that the committee could direct staff to do? I just need to know from my wording in the minutes, but I certainly can ad lib a motion if that's what we need.
My understanding is that I think we would need a motion to take it to the full board, or a recommendation, maybe a motion with a recommendation to take it to the full board. Carol, Jan, is that accurate?
Yeah, this is Jan. I'm not real sure what you guys do. I know you do your reports. So I don't know if you want a motion to include this in the report and ask the board then to direct staff or board member or the committee to start writing the letters to these people to get in, you know, to be in compliance, you know, showing them what the deficiencies are and telling them that they've got to be in compliance by the next board meeting, something to that effect. But I think you could do that. Just put it in motion to add this to your
the report at the full board.
Yes.
Okay.
And ask the board then to start the process so that either get them in compliance or to withdraw it at the next meeting.
Okay.
So this is Carol, and I just have a question. Would it be possible that we require them to have the information back to us at least 30 days before the next committee meeting? Because that would give us time to get the information ready and in the packet and be able to report to you. If we just say the next board meeting, we might get it the night before.
That's a good point, Carol. Maybe
Yeah, excellent.
Mid-May might be a good time to have that. And this is March, so that would still give them plenty of time to pull their information together and respond. It's not like we're asking them to turn it around in a week. So I think that sounds good.
Do we need a motion for that?
A motion's never going to hurt. So just make a motion to
I move to have a return response 30 days prior to the June meeting if they choose to continue their CNE certification, or not certification, what is it? CNE
Approval.
approval. Thank you.
I'll
Thank you,
second
Laura.
that.
Sorry, who was the second?
Melanie, I'll second
Thank
that.
Thank you, Melanie. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So I think we're on to our third item under unfinished business, the suggestions for regulation revision.
Yes,
Carol, will you
we
help
looked
us?
at these. Yeah, we looked at these last time and you asked me to bring back clarification on two things. And one of them, we had a lot of discussion about electronic signature because as we found out due to COVID, that's kind of really brought it forward, is a lot of these are no longer being done in person like they used to. And we used to require a sign in on a roster that day. So then the question was, well, what can we do so that we could do like an electronic signature, something along that line. So you asked me to go back and look at, what maybe is done in the state or something. And so on page 22 in your thing is kind of some information that I found. Adrian had done some work through IT as far as electronic signatures. And it appears, to qualify as an electronic signature that's enforceable, there has to be evidence of the signer's intent to execute or accept the agreement. And this is typically accomplished by requiring the signature to take affirmative action, like typing their name, drawing their signature using a mouse, touch screen, or something like that. And I think we've probably all seen that during the COVID. If we've done something, they send it to you via computer and you acknowledge, and then you kind of sign with your mouse, or something like that. So it does sound like there's ways that the CNE providers could do electronic signatures if that's how you want to go. I know we get a lot of questions about this. We do stuff via webinars or something like that, but there's no way we can get their signature. So does that mean we can't do CNE for them? And so I think it would probably be to our advantage if there was something in the revisions about electronic signature, because I have a feeling there's going to be a push to do even more of this, perhaps once the pandemic is over. Now some of them have come up with ways in which they're able to do this. It may be that they have to purchase additional electronic stuff or, something along that line, but that then would kind of fall back on the providers, I think. So that's what I found out about that. And then the second thing you wanted clarification was the time requirements. And this actually would be on page 12. And I think the confusion that existed, if I remember correctly, there's been a little bit of life that's happened since December, but under small d, it says fractions of hours over 30 minutes to be computed toward a contact hour. I think the question was, okay, where does 30 minutes fall? Because it says over, but yet if you go down lower, when it's talking about what will not be approved, it says offerings less than 30 minutes in length. So I don't know if it would be helpful if the top one said fractions of hours, 30 minutes or greater to be computed toward a contact hour shall be accepted. And then maybe the bottom one said offerings less than 30 minutes in length will not be recognized, because it seemed like we kind of left out 30 minutes. It was over or under is the way that I kind of remember this discussion. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but if I'm wrong, let me know. I think those were the two clarifications I was to bring back.
Carol, this is Karen Offenberg, and I think I was the one that brought it up because we had that discussion in the past, like, well, if you go word for word, it has to be 31 minutes. So, yeah. I mean, I know that's very nitpicky, but, and I noticed on page 8K, the definition of contact hour, it also has over 30 minutes. So I would think, I mean, if we're going to go to 30 minutes or more, that one would probably have to be changed too.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. I like what you suggested, Carol.
Well, this is Jan. I might point out that if you look in your definition regulation that's above it, it's, I think on page 8 of your handout, it has a contact hour means 50 minutes total participation, can't talk, in a learning experience that meets the definition and amendments. And it says fractions of hours over 30 minutes to be computed towards a contact hour shall be accepted. So there you've got it. Your contact hour has to be over 30 minutes. So if you're going to correct it one place, you may have to correct it under your definition of contact hours as well.
Okay.
So any other questions or conversation with Carol about either one of those changes to this?
So we're going to change it to 30 minutes or greater, right? So we include 30 minutes on everything.
That's my understanding. That's what you're proposing. Is that accurate, Carol?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what the committee and the board wants to do, I mean, that might clarify some of the confusion that has been out there. I think that's one way to do it.
That makes sense.
I could make a motion if that's what is needed.
That'd be great.
Okay. I move that we change, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, change partial wording to read 30 minutes or more. And do I need to specify under definition of contact hour? And the other, do we have to define where or just wherever it's stated?
I think probably wherever it's stated, and I'll just go through here and make sure that I catch all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Chelsea, staff member. I'm just needing some clarification. I apologize for the minutes and also for the motions because I've broken down. I have 3 motions prepared for the 3 regulations that are listed on the agenda, but I'm not quite familiar enough yet to know what's falling under which. So if I could have some clarification just for that purpose, I would appreciate it.
Chelsea, sorry about that. Yes. I think this motion is for 60-9-105. And
so this is Carol. Do you also want included in that one a definition of electronic signature, or do you want that someplace else? Because your definitions are included in 60-9-105.
well, I think it would make sense to put it in there since that's where the definitions are. I know that it asks for a signature, or the signature discussion actually takes place in, I'm looking for it now.
60-9-107. It's on page 16 in your book.
Right. So it's a different one where it's discussed, but the definitions are in 105. So.
If you, I mean, an option might be, since you already talk on page 16 in 60-9-107, under big E, it says the handwritten or electronic signature. Maybe if we had the definition in 60-9-105 of electronic signature, then that would clarify in there what is meant by electronic signature.
Okay.
I'm kind of learning this. Jan's nodding at me. I've been through
Okay.
this enough times.
Well,
If you have the definition.
the definitions are always your reference to go, your go back reference. If you need clarification is in the definition. So that's perfect if they need to go back and get some clarification on electronic signature.
This is Karen. I have another question and maybe I'm overlooking. Go back to this. On page 15, under F, where we talk about the roster, there's a line through signing a daily roster. Are we taking signature completely out?
Well, and maybe we should talk about all of these before we get to approving any one of them, since they all kind of interlace. So I don't know that we've discussed that fully. Carol, do you want to make some comments? I mean, that's the way I've read that, and I kind of thought that's where we were leaning, but.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read real fast, number 16 here, where it does have the hand on page 16 under large E, because it says the handwriting or electronic signature. Oh, that's talking about the person responsible for the providership. That would be like the CNE coordinator, that they have to have either their handwritten or electronic signature on like the transcript and the certificate. And they've been putting electronic signatures on certificates for quite some time. The provider has. I guess it's up to you all and the board, you know, whether you want a daily roster that has a physical or electronic signature on it that it's addressing on page 15.
I just thought that might affect our definition of electronic signature, because it seems to be the roster that is probably the hard piece to sign when you have webinars and things like that.
But I also think the providers are putting electronic signatures on the certificates. So
they are.
Even if we don't need, you know, and if we don't need a roster with the participant's signature, we probably would want to define electronic signatures for the instructors or to sign.
Just Jan, if I'm understanding it, I mean, you're talking about two things. Under F, it's the provider has to require participant to physically or electronically sign. And I think that would come into play. Let's say if someone says, yes, I did my CNE and it was offered by this provider. Well, if they get chosen for an audit, you contact that provider and then they can look at this roster and see, yeah, that person did sign up, they were there. Is that what that, I mean, that's what I think that is meant to do, is to be used in audits to verify someone was there. And then the other one, electronic signature, is going toward something different. Am I right or wrong?
Well, the electronic signature, we used to require when someone came to CNE that they would have to sign in, and then the coordinator would use that roster to send out certificates or give out certificates of completion, which the licensee then would have to submit if they get audited. Because all the licensees are supposed to keep copies of their CNE certificates so that they have, that's their proof that they attended. Or the provider can do a CE transcript. And we probably see the certificates more than we do the transcripts. And
You're
then
relying on the certificate for audits then.
we do, yeah, because that would be the licensee's proof that they completed that they would have a certificate to say that they had completed it.
I had a thought on this. So each provider shall maintain documentation, a daily roster. So it's not much different than if you were doing a class, a college course by the computer. And the way the professors do it is if you don't participate, you don't get credit. They don't necessarily need an electronic signature. They go by, if you're not in the chat box, you're not there. We don't necessarily have to see it. They have to show they were there. Correct? Maybe?
They would have to provide to us something
Originally.
that they got from the provider to say that they completed it if they get audited.
Right. Right.
Yeah, okay.
May I hop in for a second? This is Adrian, Operations Director at the board. There's already state statutes that govern electronic signatures. So I think it would be best if we reference those and try not to create our own, because then we're kind of getting outside of what potentially might be considered the state standard. And I also don't want to box us into accepting things a certain way in case in the future we were to have some sort of other service. If we get it so narrowly defined, it may not allow us to branch out to new services in the future.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That does make sense.
So with that, does it make sense to still require either a signature or an electronic signature on a roster so that the provider can issue the certificates in the event of an audit?
But is that daily or in the beginning and the end?
Well, some of that, it's on the onus of the provider when they issue the certificates to the attendees,
Right.
that they indeed did show up and was there the hours that was offered. So it's their onus when they sign that certificate and put those hours down, that's the hours. So how they do that can vary.
I can remember signing in years ago for a morning session and an afternoon session.
Yeah.
To prove
Right.
that you were there.
Right. And I think they still kind of have to do that because people do have a bad habit tendency to leave way early, but still
Yes.
want the full hours.
Mhm.
And that's really not legally acceptable.
Right.
This is Jan again, and I mean, if you look at F1, I mean, it's at the bottom of page 15. I mean, you're even though you're making changes where you're striking out the physical or electronic daily roster, if you get rid of if you make those changes that would say each provider shall verify that each participant attended the offering, which shall contain the following information. And then you go down to the capital C, it says the participant's name, license number, and number of contact hours awarded. So they would still be required to have some kind of documentation to show that the person was there for those days and those hours that they give the certificate for.
And I was going to chime in along that note too. This is Adrian. that in order to reduce the potential for fraud, because it's so easy to copy an actual digital signature and place it onto another document, I think you should always have that ability to go back to the provider to authenticate.
That's a great point. So I think in lieu of time, we probably need to make some decisions on how we want to handle this. Do we have a feeling on how, on what it is exactly we want to require?
On F1, I think leaving the strike through would work.
The second component there, the provider shall require each participant to physically or electronically sign a daily roster. Is that the piece you mean?
To leave that out. They would still be responsible for it, for having records that, you know, show they were there. They just wouldn't have to necessarily, if there's an expense, go to the expense of an electronic signature if they were doing it by the web.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Adrian shared that the state has definitions of an electronic signature. How do we feel like we don't need to define that now within 105?
Well, you'd have to give them the reference point to go look that up. They'd have to be somewhere in our in our document so that they could go back to that reference. Where is that? Where's that located again, Adrian? The electronic stuff?
Yeah, it's state statute 16-1605. I sent it to Carol and Jan to reference, essentially.
Okay.
For their feedback.
Adrian had a good point. I mean, the best way to define it is if it's in a statute to use a statutory definition, because if you don't define it, they're going to go on Google and come up with the definition of electronic signature. So, you know, it's best just to keep it to the definition that you've got, because you know that the legislature has determined that that is the minimum criteria and follow that. So, and you can do that in a regulation. You can define something by a statute.
I personally feel like it needs to be added to our list of definitions of what is acceptable for electronic signature in the state of Kansas. That way, it will reduce phone calls, it will reduce confusion and assumption. So if we have it listed under our definitions referring to statute 16, whatever Adrian said.
16.
Yeah, that way it just leaves out the gray area.
And this is Carol, and maybe what I can offer, just because of time's sake here, because we have another committee meeting coming up at 2 that we have to be ready for it. Would it be helpful if I worked on clearing up the pieces that we've talked about, putting the definition in definition, and then working on those other pieces and putting this back in your June packet for you to review?
I was just thinking the same thing, Carol. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Can do that.
So we'll jump down to new business and the Iowa Statistical Report.
Yeah, that's on page 23. Just kind of the same format. You know, the IOAs are still busy. Not much change there. We're still doing electronic. By and large, I think that's very popular because they get turned around very fast versus if they mail them in and all of that. So I don't think there's a problem with that or anything. The ones that we tend to have a problem are just because they haven't submitted what they're supposed to per the directions, and we can't do much about that. Yeah.
Any questions or discussion?
No.
Program coordinator education.
We've not done any of that this quarter, but we will be starting that back up. I think it's very popular. There's just been a little bit too much going on for Chelsea and I this time.
Absolutely. We understand that, so that's just fine. Let's look at our long-term provider voluntary relinquishments, and there are 2 of those.
Yeah, there's 2 listed there, and then the third one that has told me that he's relinquishing is the Bailey Medical that's listed on the delinquent one. I don't know that we've received an actual letter from him, but he sent an email to me when I was questioning more, and he told me he was just going to relinquish because according to him, he couldn't get it to work on our website to submit the reapproval, but I don't know that that's the issue. No one else has had an issue. So anyway.
Okay. Do we need a motion to accept those, or is that just informative?
I think it's just informative.
Okay. And then, moving on to our long-term provider 5-year renewal applications, Community Health System. And I know I had that one. I don't have the chart pulled up.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
It was actually you, Gwen, and Laura.
Okay.
You guys didn't have very many to review this time.
Yeah, that was kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it looked great. Laura, Gwen, what did you think?
I wondered if you look at page 70, do you have it pulled up real quick? So it lists the second one as being the RSI difficult airway course. And the bibliography listed under that is the bibliography for safe sleep presentation. And I think maybe they just got that out of order. But I do not see a bibliography for the RSI.
Good catch.
So I just, I agree. I think everything else looks pretty good. I do think some of the, and we've discussed this multiple times, the bibliography under the safe sleep presentation, it did reference like some 1996 things that were outdated. So I think in the past we have moved to approve with the acknowledgement that they need to pay closer attention to their bibliography. And then I would also recommend that they attach the bibliography for the rapid sequence of airway offering.
Is that your motion?
Yes, if that's okay.
That sounds great to me. Chelsea, did you get all that?
Yeah, I was going to say that I do have some motions typed up for these, and so I just made the addition. So I'll just read from the beginning if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Is there a committee member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the long-term provider 5-year renewal application for community healthcare system with recommendations to update bibliographies and to include the rapid sequence airway offering bibliography.
This is Rebecca. I so move, approve.
Okay, so hang on. I think Laura made the motion. Is that correct? And then Becky, are you second?
I can second. Yeah, I can second.
Okay. And then is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then we're gonna go to our second one. Sorry, I am.
That's okay. It's Faith Community Nurses Association of Oklahoma. And that was Becky, Giovanni, and Kanetta that reviewed
Great.
that.
So Becky, Kanetta, Giovanni, any comments you want to make?
This is Kanetta. On the first offering, the instructor's education and experience was, well, all I saw what was on the flyer was, maybe I'm missing any more of the instructors information on that one. And I did not see an evaluation form for the first offering.
Okay.
Just very quickly, there is a notation there that each instructor's education and experience was very abbreviated. And so I don't know if we require certain, I mean, I know that we require certain qualifications, but how much, you know, they need to be adding into the application. Are they clear as to how much they need to be?
But, you know, this one is kind of interesting, different. I noticed because it's faith community nursing. So did you kind of notice that the topics and the speakers and, you know, they weren't, you know, ICU clinical nurses, they were more that church, pastoral care, you know, those kinds of nurses. So the application was just beautifully done. It was very thorough. It was very thorough.
And
We're just not so used to seeing something targeting more. Oh, you know, what am I wanting to?
For volunteer, aren't they volunteer nurses?
Yeah, I think they are. I'm not real familiar with this Association of Oklahoma, but they were quite thorough on the report. That's all I have to say, because we've seen some pretty crappy reporting. You know, the reports weren't hardly filled out at all. And she was just so thorough.
Yeah,
Becky,
but
this
there
is
was an
Chelsea with the
evaluation.
STEM.
You got to point out, I didn't see evaluation either on the second one, but the first one I thought was okay.
So would we like to maybe approve this one and ask for a copy of the evaluation?
I would agree to that. This is Kanetta.
Okay, so maybe Chelsea, I don't know if you can
Sure. Yes.
us with that.
Is there a committee member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the long-term provider 5-year renewal application for Faith Community Nurses Association of Oklahoma with a request to include an evaluation for the first offering.
And Kanetta, you're comfortable with that?
I would, yes.
Thank you. And so that's our motion. And do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Giovanni.
Thank you, Giovanni. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion carries. And our third one is Presbyterian Manners of Mid-America.
Yeah, this is Carol, and that was Adri, Melanie, and Karen.
This is Karen, and I apologize. I need to step off here pretty soon, but I did review that, and I saw some of the same things Carol had seen. I think on page 112, their definition of contact hour had the 60 minutes. And then I did not see a bib on their 2 offerings.
Same things I got. And also this is Melanie. I also didn't see an agenda on either one of them.
There was course evaluation on both of them, though.
Yes, there was.
And they take them very seriously, their education.
Yeah.
So how would you like to handle that? Would you like to ask, did you find, Chelsea, did you review this one as well? Did you find an agenda? Maybe we missed it?
Well, the agendas actually are maybe done just a little bit different than what you're used to. Because if you look at page 129, Carol, it tells you that the program is from 2 to 3. Okay, so I mean, I don't know if you're going to have something at 2 o'clock we do this, 2:30 we do this, but it does say it's from 2 to 3. And then on page 134, the second one does say that it's from 9 to 11. So, you know, unless they do a break and stuff like that, which they probably wouldn't in an hour. I'm not even sure they would in 2 hours. I don't.
Right. So maybe just a different format than I'm used to.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you like to move forward with this one?
Could we make a motion with approve it, but with a recommendation? Or how do you feel, Carol, with them saying the 60-minute hour?
Oh, I think they definitely need to correct that because they're not computing their CNE correctly.
So should we wait to approve it until they do that?
That's one option, or you could have the option that they just have to submit an updated policy to us on how they compute their CNE. And if it does show that they've changed it to be 50, then how we've done it sometimes in the past, you've directed us to do it, is then to send them the approval once we're sure that they've changed their policy. It's up to you all how you want to do it.
From reading the director or whatever her official title is, looks like she does multiple states for multiple organization, church type, and that may be where she picked it up. Other states may do the 60 minutes. So that may have been where that came from.
Right.
I like the proposal to approve with the updated policy, just so that it brings awareness to them on how we figure hours, and that way it'll bring that awareness. And I like what Adri said, that's probably a very good assessment of what's going on when you're dealing with multiple different regulations.
And I think we should also mention that the bibs were missing.
Yes, I agree.
Madam Chair, this is Chelsea. Would you like me to read the proposed motion that I have?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Is there a committee member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the long-term provider 5-year renewal application for Presbyterian Manors of Mid-America with a request to correct the definition of a CNE contact hour and to submit documentation to KSBN staff to show the change in policy and to submit the missing bibliographies.
Do we have someone who would like to make that motion?
This is Adri Goldsmith, board member. I make the motion.
Thank you, Adri. Is there a second?
This is Karen. I second.
Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. We do not have any initial long-term provider applications this time. And our first three items of the legislative review, I think we have already taken care of. So we'll move on down to item D, the KSA 65-4207 for the list of approved courses for LMHTs. So sorry, I'm trying to scroll there. If somebody knows a page number.
It's 141. I'm sorry.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Any discussion about this?
Madam Chair, this is Chelsea. I do have a motion prepared when the committee is ready to entertain that.
I think that sounds great. Why don't you read it for us and we'll see if we have someone who's comfortable.
Sure. Is there a committee member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve KSA 65-4207 as written as a part of the 5-year legislative review process.
Do we have a member who's comfortable making that motion?
This is Melanie. I will.
Thank you, Melanie. Is there a second?
This is Adri Goldsmith, board member. I second.
Thank you, Adri. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Our last agenda item is to talk about the agenda for June of 2021. We've already discussed the three regulations that we would like to, we've made some suggestions to, and we'll look at those again. Anything else we want to add to the agenda?
You wanted us to bring back like a updated delinquent list and feedback on what we've received back from sending, if the board directs us to send stuff out.
Yes, that'd be great, Carol. Okay. With that, I think we would entertain a motion for adjournment. Sir.
And Madam Chair, this is Chelsea. Actually, I just learned that we do not need a motion to adjourn. You can
Okay.
just end the meeting.
We can just adjourn. Okay. Well, we will adjourn. We are a couple minutes early, so I appreciate everyone's participation and involvement today, and thank you for being so engaged. I hope you have a great Tuesday afternoon.
All right.